Good afternoon. Welcome to the July 7th meeting of the Oklahoma City Water Utilities Trust. First item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the June 16th meeting.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve the minutes. Voting, please. Minutes are approved. Before we go into the regular part of the agenda, I want to welcome Councilman Greenwell. I think this is your first Water Trust meeting. It's I think it's my second one. But
3-0 behind.
glad to have you. It's a very interesting part of what goes on in Oklahoma City, in my opinion, and it's just glad to have you here. The next item is the consent docket. There are a number of items on it. Do you have a motion?
Move the consent docket subject to individual consideration.
Second.
Motion is second to approve it. I'd like to, before we vote, I'd like to ask a question about 3E. I know about this specifically because it's in my council board, and it's been an area where there's been over years been quite a bit of problems off and on. Is this designed to fix most of those sewage outages that people have in that area?
Yes. So the water outages were specifically dramatic after the really hot 2011, but not all at the same time. They developed over a couple of 6 or 8 months or so. This is our second project in that neighborhood, and this was the slightly less frequent breaks, but again, we saw a continuing development in the number of breaks in that area. So it's always always prioritized based on number of breaks, frequencies per mile of pipe, unless it's a particularly critical customer like a hospital or something like that, we might do that a little sooner.
I have another question, because in the staff report it says that water lines have deteriorated as a result of corrosive soil.
Yes.
Is that something we could have or should have or can test for before we get into this situation?
And we do now. So corrosive soils are broadly located around Oklahoma City, not very much in the center part of the city is pretty normal. The corrosive soils tend to be in the outer parts of our system, and so tragically, it's some of our newer stuff. We've transitioned to plastic pipe away from metal in those areas. We do still bid some ductile iron with a wrap on it, but we've moved more and more away from that just because of the reliability for customers.
So as part of when the developer's putting in the water system now, we require a test of some kind to...
We actually have soil maps that pretty much tell us, give us that information.
Okay. Very good. We have a motion and a second. Are there other items to be discussed separately?
Do we want to check on the qualifications of the trust engineer, or whether or not the new trust engineer is going to be qualified?
We could ask them, I guess. Actually, it is of special interest. But first of all, it's in my ward, and second, my daughter lives there. Any of you that ever met my daughter would just prefer not to have her call you about once a month and ask you why she doesn't have water service. So, if she's watching, well, I'm thinking about you. Anyway, other comments about it? Voting. Thank you. Next item, item 4. The concurrence docket.
Move the concurrence docket subject to individual consideration.
Second.
A motion is second to approve the concurrence docket. Or do we need to discuss either of the matters separately? Voting, please. Concurrence docket's approved. Next item, emergency contracts.
Move item. Do we need to do these individually?
Yes, we do.
Okay, I'd move item 5A.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to approve item 5A. Comments, questions? Voting, please. 5A is approved. 5B.
Move 5B.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve 5B. Are there comments or questions? Voting, please.
And those emergencies are all related to the very heavy rains we experienced in May and in June.
Right. Next item, item 6, items to be considered individually. The first is a request for an RFP for the management of wastewater treatment facilities.
Mr. Chairman, if we could move to the presentation, please. First, we're joined today by the Water Quality Division Head, Perry Soltani. The person who helps us manage the contract, David Sobel, and Darlene Cox. And our presentation today comes from our project manager from CDM Smith, Ms. Susan Foley. This will be the third time in the history of the contract operations of the wastewater treatment plants since the first in 1987. This is the third time we've bid this contract for submittals. Susan?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very pleased to be here today. I've had an excellent past 4 months working with your very talented staff to develop this request for proposal, and I've enjoyed it thoroughly. Thank you for the opportunity to do that. We're going to talk today about the request for proposal for the wastewater treatment contract. As Ms. Slaughter said, this is the third proposal since 1987 that we will be dealing with. The second was in 2002 with a start date of 2003. So go ahead. Our current contract started January 1st, 2003 and will end on December 31st, 2016. The services that are provided under the current contract are typically the operations and maintenance of the wastewater treatment facilities plus the Witcher pump station. They are also for the solids management program. That's the work that's done from treatment of the sludge that is processed through the plants through the biosolids land application. The services include industrial pretreatment program and also the reuse program. Current contractor is Veolia Water, North America. Veolia, in one shape or form, has been the contractor since 1987. We'll be selecting a contractor based on solicitations via the request for proposal that we're discussing today. Proposals will be due September 29, 2015. Prior to the proposal time, the proposals will have a chance to attend 2 pre-proposal meetings in which they'll be allowed to ask some questions in which we'll provide them information. They will also have a significant amount of time in which they can visit with the facilities and check the facilities for themselves. The proposals, again, are due on September 29th, and then the Technical Review Committee, which will be appointed by Ms. Slaughter, evaluates the proposals. General manager's recommendations are then come back to the trust and to the city for a firm to negotiate the contract with, and then we will follow with and negotiate an agreement for consideration for the trust and the city, by this trust and the city. Okay. The contractor service period for the new contract will be starting with transition services. Transition services are the things that we're going to ask a contractor to do prior to actually starting the operational date. It allows them to be ready to jump in and start right as the start of the date. I call it the readiness period. So we're getting a contractor. Now that would, those types of things during the transition period would be required of both any contractor, be it the current contractor if they were an incumbent and then were hired again, or another contractor. But transition services would start as soon as the award is done and would go through December 2016. The operational start date for this contract is January 1st, 2017, and it's a 5-year contract. It will go through December 31st, 2021. There are 2 options for 2 renewals within the service agreement, each at 5 years. Okay? We'll be evaluating proposals with 2 components, the technical component and a cost component. We'll talk a little bit more about each of those. Okay. The technical criteria for the request for proposals is based on the contractor's approach to providing the services and to meeting the performance standards that have been set in the services contract. We'll be asking for their experience and the staffing plan, how they intend to staff to provide the services, They'll be developing operations and maintenance plans. The operations plan will be, we've requested is an approach to meeting the compliance requirements and providing the services as required in the RFP. The maintenance plans is their approach to maintaining and protecting your assets and extending the life of your assets through the service period. We've asked for references. We've asked for all past projects in the last 5 years. So it's all projects, not just selected few projects, and we are asking for references on all of them. And then we've asked for innovative and alternative recommendations. We know that some of the proposers may have some really good ideas for adding value to the work and to the service contracts and to your customers. So we've asked them to propose those innovative or alternative recommendations. We've asked for the cost of those, to implement those recommendations, and a payback period so that we know whether or not it's something that should be considered. We've also very clearly outlined compliance requirements. So this proposal has some very strict, or this request for proposal has some very strict compliance requirements that need to be met. And it's things like you need to be submitted by, at a certain time, but there's also others in which the proposals won't be accepted unless these items are met. The next criteria that we'll be looking at, or the next evaluation component, will be cost. The cost for evaluation is made up of 3 items, but the operation and maintenance fee is the annual fee that the service provider would propose to provide all the services for. We're also looking and asking the proposers to provide an electrical usage amount. This is an amount in kilowatt hours that they would expect to expend over a year at the total facilities. The idea there would be is that amount would be multiplied by the standard, I think it's 0.057 cents per kilowatt hour, and we can add that total cost to the annual service fee to come up with the total cost per year. The other options that come with that electrical usage then are that if the contractor comes in underneath the amount that they have said they will use, there's a 50% cost savings proposal so that the contractor could actually be reimbursed for 50% of the cost savings, and then the trust would receive the other 50%. However, if they go over the electrical usage amount, they pay for it all. And the other piece of the cost proposal and cost is that on an annual basis, at the end of the year, the volumes of flows will be compared against a flow volume that is established within the current request for proposal. If that flow volume varies by plus or minus 5%, the contractor and the trust would work together to resolve that difference, and the contractor can receive either a credit or a debit for additional or lower flows. Next. Their next steps include the actual issuance of the RFP, which is currently planned after the City Council meeting on July 21st for July 22nd. We intend to, as I said before, receive the proposals on the 29th of September. The TRC recommendation will be by November 17th, 2015, and we expect the contract to come back to the trust for review and approval about February 16th of next year. Transition services would start as soon as that contract is approved and go through the end of December 2016, and then the start of actual operations under the new service agreement would occur January 1st, 2017. Does anybody have any questions at this point in time? I'd be happy to answer any.
How many people responded to the last RFP we had for these services?
Larry?
Harry Soltani, wastewater quality superintendent. Last time we had 3 responding.
And are we expecting a similar number now?
Basically, we are looking at maybe about 4 or 5 potential proposals, and we're hoping 3 at least, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Welcome.
At one time, this was, one of the top largest contract wastewater operation contracts in the country. Is it still in that range? Is it in the top 10 or?
I don't actually know the exact answer to that question. I think it is one of the larger. One of the actions that we took as part of our work was to identify other communities that are still having wastewater treatment contract operations, and then to interview them and find out about their contracts, what they're finding as positives and negatives. And we did see a little bit of a change in some of the players in the organization, or players that still provide services, but but there were several that were less than this size and a couple that are bigger. Indianapolis and Milwaukee have operations that are a little bigger, but most of the others were smaller, so I would guess you're in at top tier.
And so, I guess we won't go into the specific operators, we'll just let them go through the process, but we're expecting 3 to 5.
That's basically, yes.
Okay.
Last time we did this, it was a pretty substantial savings, as I recall. I mean, very competitive bidding and...
Yeah, this is a very competitive contract. Yeah, I think price per 1,000 gallons, it's or a million gallons, it's really a good value.
Any other comments or questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
The item would request would be that the RFP be advertised. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Motion. Second to approve item 6A2. Voting, please. It's approved. Next item is the resolution recommending OKC accept the statewide local hazard mitigation assistance agreement concerning installation of backup generation capacity at Draper. Early on when we talked about this, there was some conversation about some alternatives to generation, electric, solar, and some of that other. How far are we to the point where this is this just a recommendation of it, or is this the acceptance of a specific?
So this is the acceptance of a grant based on a specific design. Tom Crowley is the representative from the design company and may be able to answer specific questions. I have a separate question from City Council that I'm working on, which is whether solar power can be used as a cost savings device for us. And I'm not very far along in that, but I will bring that to Aqua.
I'm sorry, what was the question you were asked?
Council has asked a question about, actually Councilman Shadid has asked a question about solar power use in water utilities particularly, and we're doing some homework about that.
Okay.
I don't believe that will change this request because this is these are facilities that operate in times when we lose normal power. So either way, I think solar has some risks associated. Pardon me, not risk is not the appropriate term. Has some potential for damage in the way it's currently designed, so that this backup power would be required regardless.
What kind of motivated my question was that while I was looking over this thing, I was watching that airplane that flying around the world with solar power, and I thought,
Does this particular grant require a particular kind of power generation?
Yes, Tom Crowley with Crow Engineers, Mr. Chairman, trustees. It does require a specific type of generation. We applied for diesel generation, and it was accepted as far as a FEMA. Just a little caveat, the generators were designed with pollution control equipment regulated by the EPA, and we are able to either shave power with it or start it up before a storm or start it up as a result of a power failure. So it gives them the flexibility to operate them up to almost 400 hours a year.
Any reason natural gas was not an option, or is there some technical reason?
There is a technical reason.
Okay.
Currently, there's a loophole of the federal government, the EPA specifically, has not approved natural gas diesel generation, biofuel is what we call it,
Right.
has not approved it for the Tier 4F level of pollution control.
So it's not a technical engineering performance standard as much as a bureaucratic standard that, for whatever reason, they haven't approved a cleaner fuel.
Correct.
Interesting.
Ironic, isn't it?
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank
you,
you.
Mr. Chairman. Thank you, trustees.
You bet. We have a motion.
Move approval.
Have a motion and a second on the resolution. Further questions? Voting, please. Resolution is approved. Next item is approve. Item C is to approve service availability water service agreement with Canadian County.
And we have an existing contract with Canadian County. What has happened is that since we have changed our rate structure for wholesale customers, when customers are migrating to a different specific type, in this case, away from take or pay to service availability. We do also, in renewing the contract, extend its life to 40 years.
Marshall, what part of Canadian counties does this serve?
This is really the southeast end of the county.
Southeast or southwest?
Pardon me. No, I think it starts in the southeast.
Okay.
And it does migrate to the southwest through some rollovers. They are supplying water to a couple of other water districts.
Does it go to Minco?
Not that I recall.
Okay.
Move approval.
Motion and a second. Have a second. Motion and a second to approve item 6C. Voting, please. Item D, we do not need executive session, as I understand.
Move to strike.
Second.
Motion and a second to strike D. Voting, please. D is stricken. Next item is item from trustees. Any comments? General manager reports. Monthly pro forma for May 31st.
Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to answer questions. The pro forma shows a wet year, and water costs are are a little less than the decline in revenue associated with having a very wet year. Wastewater revenue is about $1.5 million net below on its income of $91.6 million. And frankly, that is dissolved by not putting out capital projects and paying cash for them. So we're even financially for the year. Off the topic, all of the lakes are full. We are getting rain in western Oklahoma. Like Canton is at 3.5 feet down as of an hour ago, and they have had
That's a
2.5
huge
inches.
jump.
It's been great. They've had 2.5 inches of rain in that watershed, so we expect Lake Canton may get some additional water through this rain. We're expecting as much as 5 inches in town, and for the most part, we're letting that water bypass us because all of our lakes are absolutely full here and in southeast Oklahoma, which is great.
Yes,
Good.
finally.
That's good. Any other comments, questions?
I've never seen the total lakes this full ever cumulative.
Well, I mean, Draper's gone down a foot, maybe. I mean, from being well over full. And
If you wouldn't water your yard so much, it wouldn't have gone.
Yeah, right, exactly. Anyway, it's that part has been very good. Anyway, any other comments, questions? We're adjourned.